Hello, welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper of the 61st District in Montgomery County. I'd like to spend today's program discussing issues related to our judicial system, the courts. The first involves how we elect our judges and whether we should make a change to what's called merit selection. The second topic concerns the mandatory retirement age for judges. This question will be on the ballot sometime this year in Pennsylvania, and you, the voters, get to decide if you would like the age limit to be 75. This change would require amending the Pennsylvania Constitution, and you won't have much time to think about it in the booth, so we're going to talk about it today. So on today's program, I'll be discussing these issues with my guest, Lynn Marks from the Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Lynn, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Representative.
Okay. And feel free to call me Kate.
Okay.
But what I usually like to do is let our visitors to the show know a little bit about you. So where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? I know you're a lawyer, but where'd you get your degree?
Okay, well, first of all, I am sorry I'm not a constituent, but for any constituents who are watching, I want to say you're very lucky because you are really one of the shining lights in the General Assembly. So I'm honored to be on this. And
I didn't even pay you to say that.
You did not pay me to say that at all. But yes, I'm a lawyer. I grew up in suburban New York, and after college, after I had worked for 5 years, I just thought I would have more professional clout if I had a law degree. And so I came here to I went to University of Pennsylvania Law School, and I really went to law school because I wanted a tool for social change and for law reform. I had never planned to practice, but particularly coming out of college, around 1970, I thought as a woman it was just better to have that professional career and that label, and I do think it has helped to be able to call myself a lawyer.
All right, and now you are, many people don't like lawyers, but among lawyers, it's, we usually do appreciate when somebody's been through law school, taken a bar exam, and understands how it's supposed to work.
But you know what you said, that people don't usually like lawyers, and I think from what I've heard is that they don't like lawyers or doctors as a class, but they like their lawyer. So they like individuals, but they don't like, so.
I think that's true. So now you work for something called Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. What is that, and what do you do?
Okay, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is a statewide nonpartisan organization, and we work to ensure that all Pennsylvanians can go to court knowing that the judge there before is qualified, fair, and impartial. So we work on a variety of issues which we think would improve the court system, whether it's making the jury system more convenient for citizens, helping walk people through the system, strengthening judicial ethics, changing the way judges are selected, and so forth. So we're really a court reform citizen organization.
And that's your full-time job. You work there studying the issues and advocating for reform.
Correct, yeah, we do. And as I say, we have people from across the state, and lawyers and non-lawyers, because the court system affects all of us, whether we're a lawyer or not.
Right. I think most people don't think of that. I mean, they may think that the courts do mostly criminal work, and certainly the courts do a lot of work relating to crime, but I think also families end up in court often in a divorce or a support or a custody situation, and it's their first experience in being in a court.
Well, courts aren't warm and fuzzy places. It's not a place that people like being there. They're there because they, maybe there was an accident, or maybe they've been accused of a crime, or a loved one has died or something like that, or they're a juror and it's inconvenient. And so, it's really important that people own the courts and realize that any one of us could be there. And so to the extent that we can make them better and treat everybody alike, I think the better.
Well, and I also think that there's no natural constituency for the courts. There's no group other than yourselves out there looking at the courts as a system and in a reform mode, because most of us don't expect to be in court.
Correct.
We don't expect to have an accident. We don't expect to have a divorce. We don't expect to be accused of a crime or anything like that. So it's very difficult to find people who actually care about these things, the way Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts does.
Well, not only can any of us end up in court, but court decisions impact virtually all aspects of our lives, whether or not we've actually been involved in a case. If it's if it's our state Supreme Court or the appellate courts, which are the level above the trial courts, those cases could impact all of us. So we all should take, we should really watch the court system, make sure that we have good judges, advocate at elections for those who we think would be good judges, because it belongs to all of us. It's a matter of justice.
Right. So let's talk about our first topic
Okay.
for today, which is the age that judges should be required to retire.
Okay.
Now, many people know that on the federal bench, there is no mandatory retirement age. And one can, like the late Justice Scalia, literally sit on the bench until you die, But in the state courts, we do have an age, and right now that age is set at 70. Now, I had a bill go through the House and Senate twice that would let the voters decide whether that age should be 75. So what issues do you see with that question?
Okay.
What age should judges be forced to retire in Pennsylvania?
Well, it's been in our state constitution since 1968 that judges need to step down at the end of the year in which they turn 70. And there are a number of arguments on both sides. I think the biggest argument to extending it to 75 is that age is really, it's not just a chronological thing. I mean, age deterioration. It's, it's individual. And so I think we all know people who are sharp as a tack in their 90s, and we all know people who are 60 years old, who are not doing as well mentally. And so many people think it's really should be individual, and that to cut it off at 70, we're basically losing a lot of people who would be very good judges, who are good judges now, and there's no reason to think that they were going to get worse in that 5 years. It's also thought to be one of these professions, really, where you kind of get better with age. It takes more, more experience. And you mentioned that the federal system has no age limit, and there's no age limit to be in the legislature or in the executive branch. And we have a judicial discipline system where people can bring complaints against judges, not only for ethics, but certainly if they think there's a problem with mental acuity.
There's a judicial conduct board, and there's a court of judicial discipline, and there are other mechanisms that can be used if a person really did have a problem.
Right. And so that's another reason why people think move it to 75, and if there are problems, we'll deal with it that way. I know another argument, which has been, is that women who become judges often become judges a little bit later in their career, especially if they've been home with family. And then this would
Sure, some of them actually go to law school a little later, and some of them then don't have enough experience to be elected to the bench until they're a little bit older than their male peers.
Right, right. And then the arguments on the side of keeping it at 70, a lot of that has been, well, there is age deterioration, even though, from what I understand from all the medical people, that's not a big concern. I will say, when this passed the Constitution in 1968 to have 70 as the age limit, the median age limit for people was around 70, something like that.
Right.
And from what I've heard, at least in the figures that I saw a few years ago, it was close to 79. But that's on the reason why you might extend it. I think
I think it is because there's no magic to the number picked in 1968.
Correct.
Because in 1968, 70 was old, and it might be a lifetime election or appointment as a judge. But now 70 is not old. I mean, people are still practicing law, people are still doing their lifetime careers or starting second and third careers. And so I don't think 70 is as old as it used to be.
Yeah, well, that's certainly an argument for extending it. I think those who argue not to extend it also think it's important to get new blood regularly. And if you have judges who are staying till 75, it's not that you'll have fewer vacancies, but you'll have fewer, the vacancies will be put off. And so
another 5 years.
Another 5 years. So some people think, that there is a senior judge system where people can sit until they're 78. It's a little bit different from our electing a judge, so I don't want to get into it too much, but there's availability for most judges to sit on a year-by-year basis till 78. But I think the biggest argument for keeping it at 70 is having new blood, and if there are age-related problems, it kind of it obviates the whole need to go through the discipline system. It can be embarrassing to say, hey, Representative Harper, I think maybe it'd be time for you to step down soon.
Hey, trust me, we don't even have that rule.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have that kind of a situation here.
Yeah, well, there is that judicial discipline system, but somebody needs to bring a claim.
I do remember some years ago now, a judge in Montgomery County showed signs of early onset Alzheimer's. It was very sad. His peers on the bench convinced him to step down. And it was sad, but it's a physical disease, and he had it. It was unfortunate. But I mean, I don't think that in general we have to worry. The testimony we had at a hearing on this topic was from a doctor. If you make it to 70 in pretty good shape, you're probably going to make it to 75 in pretty good shape. And doctors have said that age is just a bad way of selecting who's in, who's out. It's just a bad way of doing it because people have individual abilities and individual health.
So there was a bill your viewers might be interested in, which was to eliminate the age limit altogether. And so they have in the executive and legislative branch. But so the bill now, the constitutional amendment that will go to the voters this year, is somewhat of a compromise. So it's increasing it from 70 to 75, but it's not eliminating it altogether. I mean, people say often that any age limit is arbitrary, but at least they think it makes sense to have it at 75.
Right. I've actually heard citizens, not lawyers, say it's age discrimination. How can you force someone out just because they hit an age? But that's not the way the law puts it.
But I think, can I just add that the whole area of mandatory retirement is not an issue just for judges. I mean, it's being discussed in the legal communities and medical communities and academic ones as people are living longer, healthier lives. I think people are rethinking mandatory retirement ages across the board.
All right, so let's talk just a little bit about the reasons why it's a good idea. And
Okay.
I do have to say that this was my bill. And why did I introduce it? Well, I think when people go to court, they kind of have a view of the judge as somebody who's just a step under God or something, somebody who's really wise, somebody who's going to do justice.
Right.
And that's what they expect. And I have come to realize, probably because I'm getting older myself, that life experience adds to that. Experience at the bar is important. The more cases you've seen of a certain kind, the better you are at figuring out how this differs with the precedent in the courts and how it should change the law. And also the longer life experience you have, the more likely it is that somebody in your family's been through a divorce. Maybe somebody got arrested. Maybe somebody's had a problem with mental illness. Maybe somebody's been a veteran who came back and had post-traumatic stress. The longer you live as a human being, I think those experiences probably enrich your ability to make wise choices. So that's why I actually sponsored the bill. But ultimately, the choice belongs to the voters.
I'm not sure everybody knows, but in order to make this change requires a constitutional amendment. And in Pennsylvania, that means that the legislature needs to pass a bill in 2 consecutive sessions, and then that goes to the people in a referendum vote, which is what your constituents and people across the state will be asked. So it's really only we, the people, who can change the Constitution.
And that's exactly right. The legislature doesn't have that option, and it's going to be up to our viewers, the voters, to decide what they think the mandatory retirement age should be, 70 or 75. That's the choice they're going to get. And it's probably something they should think about before they walk into the booth so that they're ready for that question.
Well, I think it's great that you're doing this show because I think people do not know that. And too often on people's ballots, these constitutional amendments, these referendum are buried somewhere on the bottom.
Right.
And you really have to look for them. So I think it's great that you're doing this.
Well, hold that thought, because we're going to take a quick break. And when we return in just a moment, let's talk about the other thing that Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts has been working on, and that's called merit selection. And what does that mean? So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Are we connected on Facebook? It's easy to add my legislative news and community updates to your news feed. My page is at facebook.com/Rep. Kate Harper. Once you're there, make sure to hit like and we'll be connected. I give you updates from Harrisburg, talk about what's happening in our community, and try to feature lots of photos of the great people in our district that I get to meet every day. Plus, it's a forum where you can share your viewpoints with me. Facebook really is a great way to keep in touch. Again, my page is at facebook.com/Rep. Kate Harper. Once you're there, hit like and we'll be connected. Hope to see you online.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. My guest today is Lynn Marks. Lynn is talking about several issues relating to our judicial system because she represents a group called Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. We are going to put Lynn's website up if you want more information about the things we've been talking about. But right now we're going to switch topics a little bit. We've been talking about what age should judges be required to retire. And we're going to talk a little bit, Lynn, if we can, about something you've been working on for, I want to say, decades, which is merit selection. What's that all about?
Well, a lot of people don't know, but in our state courts in Pennsylvania, all judges are chosen in partisan elections, which means people run on a party label, like a Republican or a Democrat. So they're all partisan elections, from the magisterial district judge all the way up to our state Supreme Court.
And from a county. That's like the only thing you know about them on the ballot.
In the primary, it says where what county you're from, but on the general, it doesn't say.
Doesn't even say that.
And so for the three appellate courts at the Supreme, Superior, and Commonwealth, they run statewide, and people often have no idea who they are. Usually people who run for judge are not household names. And in order to run and win, you basically have to run a political campaign. You have to raise tons of money, and who cares about these? It's mostly special interest groups and lawyers who appear before the courts.
Who will give money.
Who will give money.
Or feel constrained not to be absent from some fundraiser.
So our state Supreme Court, for instance, last November in the election, more than $16 million was spent to elect Supreme Court judges.
And they're not allowed to tell us where they stand.
They're not allowed to say, and to camp. You know, you have to remember then that judges are different from legislators or governors or mayors. I mean, those people take positions on issues, and we vote for them because they're pro-life or pro-choice or in favor of drilling or the death penalty or something like that. But judges are supposed to make individual decisions based solely on the facts and the law, and not according to whatever the hot button issues are of the day. It's a
So it's
very,
actually
very
unethical
different role.
of them, isn't it, to give opinions on things that might come before them?
Well, now they are allowed to say kind of basically where they stand on issues. So for instance, I can say I'm pro-choice or I'm pro-life, but I can't say if an abortion case comes before me, this is how I would rule.
Okay.
And so voters have very little information. And the reality is, even if you are pro-choice or pro-life, a case might come before you with particular facts where you need to take a position which is different from what you personally feel. So I think it's good for voters to really be aware that judges are different from legislators and governors and presidents and so forth. So we at Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, along with a growing coalition of civic groups like League of Women Voters and Common Cause and bar associations and business groups, think it's time to get our judges out of the campaign and fundraising business. We are focusing on those 3 statewide courts, and we think the judges should be chosen according to their qualifications, not according to how much money they raised or a slogan or if they happen to have a good ballot position.
Or a good name.
Or a good name in certain
Justice
counties.
Bear, I remember he had teddy bears on his signs.
Yeah, well, there was a famous wrestler with that name. You'll often see people say with an Italian name, we'll do better where there's a higher
percentage of Italian,
right.
sure.
But that doesn't mean that person will necessarily be a good judge or
Well,
not.
I have to confess this. Before I got into politics and was paying a lot of attention myself, if there was a woman on the ballot with an Irish surname, I'd vote for her. That's a silly way to pick a judge.
Well, that's what people often do. But yeah, you're right. She might have all the things which you think in terms of her background, but does she have a good temperament? Is she fair and impartial? Does she know the law? Has she been in a courtroom?
Come on, all Irish people are good that way. No kidding.
I'm going to keep out of this one. But what we want is a system which is designed to get the most qualified people on the bench and not necessarily the best fundraiser or politician.
But doesn't it mean that somebody else will be making these decisions in a back room somewhere and saying, here's the judge you ought to appoint? Who makes the decision if we do it that way?
Yeah, a system called merit selection is often called that. There's a bipartisan citizen commission of Pennsylvanians, lawyers and non-lawyers, who would basically screen applicants. People would apply as opposed to being a political campaign. There would be requirements written right into the Constitution. They'll vet them and interview people. That commission will give a list of 5 to the governor, and the governor must select somebody from that list, not anybody he wants.
Okay.
Then sends a name over to the Senate for confirmation. And then in 4 years, after 4 years on the bench, we the people can vote in a nonpartisan retention election whether to keep that judge on the bench for a full term. So it's
only 4 years. Right now it's a 10-year retention.
Right, so it's to start with 4, and if the voters approve, then it goes to 10. So it's complicated, but the whole idea is to develop a system, again, which is based on qualifications. And so I think you'll really, in the states that have it, and we're only a handful of states that elect all of our judges in partisan elections. So we want people who are really qualified. It opens the pool of candidates to people who don't feel they can raise money or don't have political contacts. And we want to have a system which is so based on qualifications so that people will feel when they go before a court that they're not going before somebody who was basically there because they raised a ton of money from a special interest group or not.
Okay. So what kind of qualifications would this group look at?
Well, right into the Constitution would be that they had been in a law-related job for a minimum of 10 years. Right now, there's no requirement at all. The only qualifications right now to be a judge are to be 21, a lawyer, and a resident for 1 year, and that's it.
Wow.
They'd also
21-year-old judge. That's kind of scary. Especially based on our last conversation.
They've got a good name, and they have money and a good ballot position. They're
going to get elected.
They could get elected. It's a crapshoot. It's often called a lottery, and that's why merit selection is a system which is not a lottery, but really focuses in and hones in on qualifications. Also, there'll be many people who will put their name in who won't now. Maybe they are a public interest lawyer.
Right.
Or they're in academia.
Or somebody who's, right, just not good at the things you got to do to get elected.
Yeah, yeah. So there's no perfect system, we know, but we know that the current system of electing our statewide judges is just too much based on political considerations, how much money they have, and then pure luck, you know, depending on where's the big turnout and where your ballot position is.
Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left. I want you to address two issues. First of all, where is this bill in the process? It's not ready for the ballot
Right.
yet. And the second issue would be, where do we go from here if people are interested in that?
Okay, so in order to change the way judges are selected, the statewide level requires a constitutional amendment. A bill is now pending in the House of Representatives. So if anybody is interested, this is a time to let your representative know.
To vote for this?
To vote for this bill,
Okay.
House Bill 1336.
1336,
And
okay.
it's because it's a constitutional amendment, you and your colleagues would have to pass it in 2 sessions, and then it goes to the people in a referendum vote, just like we discussed earlier with retirement. So only we, the people, can change how our judges are selected. And I just ask your listeners, you know, to think about how you made decisions when you voted in November, if you voted. You know, under 20% of people even vote for judge. And I'm not talking about local judges, because people often know who come and
You can
please.
know your local judge,
Yeah.
your county judge, you can know.
So we're really focusing
Might
in.
live in your neighborhood or something.
Yeah.
You know?
So we're focusing in on the 3 statewide courts. They're called
Just
appellate
the
courts.
appeals courts.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, and that bill is pending right now. And if people want to know more about this issue, they could once again go to your website. We're going to put that up,
Right.
So that people can go to your website, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and read more about this. But the real thing is, it's got to pass in 2 different sessions. I know this because I just went through it with the mandatory retirement bill,
Right.
and that's actually very difficult.
Well, you know, it's a big thing to change the Constitution. It takes a lot, but it should be.
So
I
it should be
Yeah,
difficult.
it should be. You don't want to take people's rights away. You're giving rights. I mean, it's a big deal. So even though I would like this reform to happen sooner rather than later, it makes sense that it takes a long time to change our Constitution. But ultimately, it is up to we, the voters, to change. But I do hope if people are interested and are frustrated now with the way that our judges are chosen, that they will contact their legislator, which is
Right.
you,
And ask us to vote for
and
it.
write letters to the editor, and just be aware. I ask people to think about what they want when they go to a courtroom, you know, what they want in justice, and is it somebody who has run in political campaigns fueled by money, or is it somebody who's gone through a vetting process which really looks at their qualifications?
Okay, in the brief time we have left, who picks the people who do the vetting?
That's a good question. So there's a citizen nominating commission, and it would be selected by the governor would have some picks, and there would be some picks by the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, the majority party and the minority party. So nobody can control this commission. It's very important that there be a number of appointers. And as I said before, there'll be lawyers and non-lawyers, and it would be bipartisan.
Okay, and then at the end of the day, they produce a slate.
Correct, yeah. They send names to the governor.
So that's coming in the future. Coming sometime this year is the question on the ballot about mandatory retirement. And we're about out of time, Lynn. I appreciate your coming in and talking to us, and your website will be up so people can go visit Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts and learn more about both of these issues. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. If you have questions about what we've been discussing today, feel free to contact me at my Bluebell office or through my website. And that information will also be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching. Please join me next time for Legislative Report.